Black Friday was supposed to be chaotic, not deadly. People expected fights, shouting, maybe a few bruises, but they didn't expect the store doors to open by themselves at 3:17 a.m. And they definitely didn't expect the security cameras to show a crowd entering, with no one standing in front of them at all. Just shadows moving like bodies, without faces, without shape, sliding inside as if the store was swallowing them. What happened that night wasn't a sale. It was a trap. The storm came early that year. Sharp cold, wet asphalt, wind slicing through the empty parking lot like a warning sign nobody cared to read. Every year the town waited for Black Friday like it was a sport. But this time, something was different. People weren't excited. They were restless. It was 2:59 a.m. outside Hollinger's Superstore, one of those giant, warehouse-style places that looked like a concrete box dropped onto the edge of town. The line of shoppers stretched from the doors to the far end of the parking lot. But the crowd wasn't buzzing or chatting or laughing. They were stiff, quiet, almost frozen in their own breath. The narrator's voice cuts in, steady, observing, not emotional, just honest. Most people blamed the cold for the silence. But those who were there swear the cold wasn't the problem. Something else was. Something watching them. A security guard named Mark Renner, 42, stood near the entrance, rubbing his hands together and checking his watch. He'd done Black Friday shifts for 8 years. He'd seen panicked mobs, broken glass, people fighting over flat screens. But with all that experience, he couldn't explain why the hairs on his arms stood up tonight. The air felt wrong, heavy, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Inside the store, 2 cashiers were on break. The manager was asleep in his office. The aisles were perfectly arranged. Rows of discounted TVs, mountains of box toys, stacks of appliances. Everything was ready. Everything was too ready. And then it started. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the sliding doors shuttered. Not opened, shuttered, like something was pushing on them from the inside. Not out. Mark frowned, stepped closer, and tapped the glass. But before he even reached the door, it slid open with a long, slow sigh. The crowd pushed forward instinctively, years of consumer instinct kicking in. But then they stopped, because they realized the automatic sensors hadn't triggered. There was no one anywhere near the door. The sensors on that model triggered at 4 feet. And yet the doors had opened at 15 feet. Mark froze. His hand hovered near his radio. His brain told him there had to be a logical explanation, pressure change, malfunction, a draft. But it didn't feel like any of those. The narrator again. A malfunction should feel random. This felt intentional. The crowd waited for Mark to wave them in. But even he didn't dare take a step. The wind stopped, dead silent. And then, the security camera above the door blinked. Static, then clarity. And on the monitor inside the security station, footage that would later be taken as evidence, something appeared. Not a person. Not an animal. Not even a shadow. More like a humanoid outline, but hollow. As if a human shape had been cut out of reality itself. It slid across the parking lot without footsteps, without noise, without form. And when it reached the door, the automatic sensors reacted, as if it had mass, as if it were alive. The doors opened for it. Mark stumbled backwards. The shoppers leaned away, pressing into each other, whispering, their breath fogging the air. Then the real terror hit. More shapes, 7, 8, maybe 10, drifted toward the entrance. Their movements weren't natural. Movement should have weight, rhythm, hesitation. These shapes moved like they were gliding underwater. Every single automatic sensor flicked green. Every door panel slid wide open. And just like that, the shapes entered the store. The lights inside flickered. The temperature dropped so fast the glass frosted from the inside. Shelves creaked. Boxes shifted. The building groaned like it was being pulled apart from its foundation. Mark tried to speak. His voice cracked. Everybody, stay back. Nobody listened. Not because they were brave, but because they were stuck like their bodies didn't want to move. It didn't matter. The shapes didn't care about the people outside. The shapes were inside now, deep inside the aisles of Hollinger's. And the moment they vanished beyond the aisles, The doors slammed shut with a metallic thud. One woman screamed. Another dropped her coffee. Someone whispered a prayer. Mark grabbed his radio and shouted for backup. Static answered. When the manager finally woke and checked the screens, his jaw dropped. The recordings showed the shapes darting through the aisles. Fast, too fast, like tearing wind. They knocked over toy towers, ripped through plastic, toppled displays. But they weren't random. They were searching. For what? No one knew. But at 3:28 a.m., the store lights turned blood red. Every emergency bulb triggered at once. That was when the first human scream echoed from inside. High, sharp, cutting through every wall. Nobody could tell if it came from an employee or a shopper. They only knew one thing. Someone was trapped inside with those things. Mark rushed forward against every instinct and tried yanking the door open. It didn't budge. It didn't even shake. Felt like concrete. Like the store wasn't a building anymore. It was a sealed jaw. A little boy in the crowd whispered to his mother, "Mom, I don't think the store wants us to leave." And he wasn't wrong. Inside the building, aisle by aisle, the shapes were splitting apart. Some climbed the shelves like spiders. Some crawled under display tables. Some hovered near the ceiling, bending the lights. They weren't hunting randomly. They were herding. The narrator gives the final, cold line of part 1. Black Friday was always about taking. But that year, it wasn't the customers doing the taking. The lights inside shut off completely. Darkness swallowed the store whole. And then total silence. The moment the store went dark, the crowd outside froze. Not a single person moved. People had seen fights, riots, even shootings on Black Friday before. Chaos wasn't new. But this was different. Something about that darkness felt intentional. The narrator speaks with a steady, cold clarity. There's a silence that comes after violence. But what happened inside Hollinger's wasn't violence. It was something older. Mark, the security guard, kept pulling at the door, his breath fogging the glass. The metal didn't even vibrate. It was like the door wasn't connected to power anymore. It wasn't connected to anything. Then, bang! Something slammed from inside the store. Hard. The crowd flinched. Someone screamed. A man dropped his phone. Mark pressed his face against the glass, trying to see through the pitch-black aisles. Nothing. Just darkness swallowing everything. But the doors, they felt warm. They shouldn't have. It was freezing out. And still, the glass felt like it was heating up from the inside. Then another bang, followed by a scraping sound, like something dragging across the floor. Slow, deliberate, heavy. A woman grabbed her daughter and started running toward the parking lot. But halfway across the asphalt, the girl stopped and twisted her head back toward the building. "Mom!" she whispered, voice cracking. There at the door. But she wasn't looking at the glass. She was looking at the roofline, because something was crawling up there. A shape, not human. Its limbs weren't shaped right. Too long, bending the wrong way, moving across metal panels like a spider without bones. It pressed its faceless head against the edge and listened. For what? Nobody wanted to find out. Mark finally snapped out of the paralysis and screamed to the crowd. "Move back! Move back now!" But the crowd didn't get far before the store lights flickered once. Red, then black again. And when the power blinked, the entire outside world caught a glimpse through the glass. Not of the store, not of aisles, not of products. They saw a person, a young stock clerk named Tessa Morgan. She was standing in aisle 14, eyes wide, shirt torn, chest heaving. She stared straight at the doors like she could see through the darkness. But something was wrong with her. Her body was there. Her face wasn't. It wasn't missing, it was blurred, smudged, like someone took an eraser to her features. One of the shoppers gasped and stepped back so fast he fell. The lights flickered again, and Tessa was gone. Not walked away, not ran, gone. The store wasn't showing them what was inside. It was showing them what it wanted them to see. Mark grabbed his radio again. Still static. He slammed it against his hand. "Come on, somebody. Anybody. Respond." Static. Then, a voice. Barely audible. broken, glitching. Don't open doors. Don't let them. They're not. Then a sharp screech blasted through the radio, loud enough to make people cover